The moment Daniel Whittaker stepped into the Lancaster Grand, the entire lobby seemed to freeze. Time itself appeared to hold its breath. The luxury hotel, known worldwide for its magnificent crystal chandeliers and pristine marble floors, had long stood as a symbol of power and status in the city. But on that particular afternoon, it would become the center of a storm that no one saw coming. Daniel moved with purpose across the lobby, his sharp navy suit tailored perfectly to his athletic frame. He carried himself with quiet confidence, not the loud, attention-seeking kind that demanded recognition, but the rare sort that came from knowing exactly who you are and what you're worth. The soft click of his polished shoes against the marble floor seemed to echo through the suddenly hushed space. Every eye in the lobby followed his movement, though Daniel paid them no mind. His focus remained on what he had come to do. As he approached the gleaming front desk, he reached into his inner pocket and retrieved a black card. Not just any card, but the exclusive Centurion card that few people ever had the privilege to hold. The clerk behind the counter, a young man named Ethan with slicked back hair and a practiced smile, barely glanced at the card before something changed in his expression. His professionally polite demeanor slipped, revealing something ugly underneath. "Probably maxed out," Ethan remarked, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. The insult hung in the air, thick with arrogance and prejudice. Several guests nearby shifted uncomfortably, while others pretended not to notice. The beautiful lobby, with all its grandeur, suddenly felt suffocating. Daniel didn't flinch. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes, cold and calculated, told a different story. There was a glint in them, something that might have warned Ethan had he bothered to look closely enough. But Ethan didn't look. He didn't see the storm brewing behind Daniel's composed exterior. What the clerk didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this wasn't just any guest standing before him. Daniel Whittaker was not only there as a customer. He was the senior director of a global firm responsible for overseeing compliance audits. More importantly, he was the man behind the $2.8 billion deal that was about to transform the Lancaster Grand's future, also the hotel chain had hoped. He was, in short, a man with more power than anyone in that lobby could possibly imagine. And the disrespect he faced that day, it would cost them everything. Part 2. The encounter. "Your room is ready, sir," Ethan finally said, sliding a key card across the polished marble counter with barely concealed disdain. "Though I should inform you that we've had to downgrade you to a standard room. Our executive suites are currently occupied." Daniel accepted the key card without comment, though he knew very well that wasn't true. His team had confirmed the hotel's occupancy before his arrival, part of the thorough audit process they'd been conducting for weeks. The Lancaster Grand was operating at only 60% capacity that week. There were plenty of executive suites available. "The elevators are to your right," Ethan added, already turning his attention to his computer screen, dismissing Daniel without another word. Daniel nodded once, picking up his small leather overnight bag. As he walked toward the elevators, he couldn't help but notice how the staff's eyes followed him, some curious, others judgmental. He'd experienced this kind of treatment before, but today felt different. Today, it would have consequences. His room on the 4th floor was nice enough, though it was clearly not what he had reserved. The view overlooked the service entrance, rather than the cityscape he'd been promised. Another small slight, another piece of evidence to add to his growing file. After settling in, Daniel decided to visit the executive lounge, a space his platinum membership should have granted him access to, regardless of his room assignment. As expected, his key card didn't work at the lounge entrance. When he requested access from a passing staff member, he was informed that the lounge was reserved for our premium guests only, despite the fact that his membership status clearly qualified him. "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding," the staff member suggested with a tight smile. "You might want to check with the front desk again." Daniel simply nodded and walked away. There was no misunderstanding. This was a pattern, one he'd been documenting meticulously. Throughout the evening, the slights continued. A request for room service took nearly 2 hours to arrive. When Daniel asked about using the hotel's business center, he was told it was closing early for maintenance, though he later saw other guests being admitted without question. Each incident was minor on its own, the kind of thing that would be easy to dismiss as a misunderstanding or poor service. But Daniel knew better. He'd seen the reports, read the complaints, analyze the patterns. The Lancaster Grand had a problem, one they'd been hiding beneath their veneer of luxury and exclusivity for far too long. By nightfall, Daniel had seen enough. It was time to act. The hotel's culture of bias wasn't just hurting him. It was hurting everyone who had ever been treated as less than worthy within these walls. And he had the power to make it stop. Walking back to the front desk, Daniel knew the game was about to change. Ethan was still there, his shift not yet over. When he saw Daniel approaching, a flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "Excuse me, Ethan," Daniel said, his voice steady but carrying an edge that caught the clerk's attention. "I'd like to know why I've been treated like a suspect here rather than a guest." Ethan glanced up, trying to mask his discomfort. "I don't know what you mean, sir." "Oh, I think you do," Daniel replied calmly. "The card, the downgrade, the way you've treated me from the moment I arrived. Let's not pretend it wasn't obvious." Ethan swallowed hard, glancing nervously at the other guests in the lobby who had begun to take notice of their conversation. "Let's cut to the chase," Daniel continued, his tone ice-cold, but never raising his voice. "I'm not here to complain. I'm here because you've crossed a line." He paused, letting his words sink in. "And now I'm about to make sure everyone knows." Before Ethan could respond, Daniel slipped a business card across the desk. Ethan's eyes widened as he read the words printed on the crisp white card. Senior Director, Equity Compliance, Dominion Ventures. In that instant, Ethan realized the gravity of his mistake. But it was already too late. Part 3. The revelation. Daniel left the desk without another word, leaving Ethan frozen in place. The young clerk's mind raced as he realized what had just happened, but the damage had already been done. What Ethan and the rest of the staff at the Lancaster Grand didn't know was that Daniel's visit wasn't random. His company had been reviewing the hotel's practices for weeks after multiple reports of racial profiling and bias had emerged. The treatment he received at check-in wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a much larger systemic issue that the hotel had been sweeping under its luxurious rugs for years. Daniel had been documenting everything from the moment he walked through those grand doors, the slights, the mistreatment, the overt and subtle prejudice. His team had been collecting evidence of the hotel's broken systems, from discriminatory hiring practices to patterns of guest profiling. All of it would be sent to corporate, but more importantly, it was going public. Unknown to Ethan, the entire lobby encounter had been captured on video by one of Daniel's team members posing as a regular guest. By morning, the footage would be in the hands of every major news outlet and spreading like wildfire across social media. What had begun as a quiet humiliation was about to turn into a viral storm. Daniel returned to his room and made a series of phone calls. The first was to his team, confirming that they had everything they needed. The second was to the CEO of Dominion Ventures, informing him that the $2.8 billion deal they'd been considering with the Lancaster Grand's parent company was officially off the table. The third was to his legal team, instructing them to release the full audit report first thing in the morning. As he hung up the phone, Daniel felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. It was about ensuring that what happened to him wouldn't happen to anyone else. He gazed out the window at the city lights below, knowing that by this time tomorrow, the Lancaster Grand would never be the same again. Part 4. The video of the incident at the front desk, where Ethan had mocked Daniel in front of everyone, exploded across social media by dawn. #LancasterGrand shame, was trending within hours. People rallied behind Daniel, sharing their own stories of discrimination at luxury establishments. Activists, influencers, and concerned citizens flooded the comments with support and calls for boycotts. By morning, the hotel's PR team was in full damage control mode, scrambling to issue a statement. Their first attempt, a vague apology for any misunderstanding that may have occurred, only fueled the fire. The public wasn't having it. They wanted accountability, not corporate spin. The truth had already spread, and no amount of carefully worded statements could erase the undeniable evidence that was mounting by the hour. Former employees began coming forward with their own stories of the toxic culture within the Lancaster Grand. Former guests shared similar experiences of being profiled or mistreated. Meanwhile, investors began pulling their money. The hotel's stock plummeted by 17% before noon. The board of directors was in crisis mode, making desperate calls to stop the bleeding. Daniel's audit report, carefully compiled, meticulously documented, and utterly irrefutable, hit the corporate offices and the board of directors that morning. The evidence was damning. A pattern of discrimination that spanned years, complaints that had been buried, employees who had been silenced when they tried to speak out. The board took immediate action, but it was too little too late. The $2.8 billion expansion deal with Dominion Ventures was pulled without hesitation. A full review of the hotel chain's operations was announced, but the damage to their reputation was already done. The general manager, who had ignored numerous complaints over the years and fostered the toxic culture, was fired on the spot. Ethan, who thought he was untouchable in his role at the prestigious hotel, was quietly escorted out of the building later that day. But it wasn't just Ethan who paid the price. The entire hotel chain was put under intense scrutiny. Within days, the Lancaster Grand's reputation was shattered. Customers cancelled bookings, events were pulled, and travel influencers were calling for a complete boycott of all properties owned by the parent company. As for Daniel, he didn't gloat. He didn't bask in the public support or the media attention. He simply watched as the empire that had treated him like an outsider crumbled beneath its own weight. When asked for comment by reporters, he offered only one statement. This was never about one incident or one person. This was about a system that needed to change. Sometimes change only comes when we're brave enough to hold up a mirror and force people to see the truth they've been avoiding. Part 5. The legacy. The scandal didn't just stop with the Lancaster Grand. It became a turning point for the hospitality industry as a whole. Other hotel chains began re-evaluating their practices, ensuring that nothing like this could ever happen to them. Diversity audits became mandatory, and what had once been a shameful practice, swept under the rug, was now an industry-wide concern that needed to be addressed openly. The Lancaster Grand's parent company eventually hired a new management team and implemented extensive changes to their policies and training. They established an independent oversight committee to ensure accountability and transparency. It would take years for them to rebuild their reputation, but they were finally taking the necessary steps. Ethan disappeared into obscurity. His reputation, once inflated by his position at the prestigious hotel, was now in tatters. He had been exposed for what he was, a man too arrogant to realize that treating others as lesser would eventually cost him everything. Daniel never returned to the Lancaster Grand. He didn't need to. The world had seen what happened when people like him were underestimated, and he knew that the change he had sparked wasn't just about one hotel. It was about the system that had allowed places like the Lancaster Grand to thrive on inequality for far too long. 6 months after the incident, Daniel received an unexpected letter. It was from a young woman who had worked at the Lancaster Grand for 3 years as a housekeeper. She wrote to thank him for his courage, explaining how the changes that had been implemented following the scandal had transformed her workplace. For the first time, she felt respected and valued. She wasn't alone. Dozens of similar messages poured in from employees across the industry who had benefited from the new standards. Daniel kept every letter, a reminder that standing up for what's right ripples outward in ways we can never fully anticipate. The real message was clear. When you stand up to injustice, when you refuse to be silenced, the consequences for those who perpetrate the wrongdoing are far greater than they ever expected. But more importantly, the positive change that can come from one person's courage can transform entire industries and improve countless lives. Part 6. The reflection 1 year to the day after his visit to the Lancaster Grand. Daniel found himself speaking at a conference on corporate ethics and responsibility. The audience included executives from hospitality chains worldwide, eager to learn from the man who had become synonymous with accountability. As Daniel took the stage, he thought back to that moment in the lobby, how one small act of prejudice had revealed the cracks in what had seemed like an impenetrable empire. The true measure of a company isn't found in its profits or its prestige, he told the hushed audience. It's found in how it treats people, at every level of interaction. Dignity isn't a luxury to be afforded only to those you deem worthy. It's a fundamental right that belongs to everyone who walks through your doors. He paused, looking out at the sea of attentive faces. The question isn't whether bias exists in your organization. It does, because we're all human. The question is what you're doing to identify it, address it, and create systems that prevent it from flourishing. Are you brave enough to look in the mirror? Are you strong enough to make the changes that need to be made before someone else forces your hand? As Daniel concluded his speech, the audience rose in a standing ovation. But he wasn't thinking about the applause. He was thinking about all the people who had ever felt small or insignificant when faced with power and privilege. He was thinking about how one voice, unwavering and unbroken, could unravel the seemingly impenetrable. In the end, Daniel Whittaker didn't just expose a corrupt hotel. He exposed a system built on assumptions, prejudice, and power imbalances. The downfall of the Lancaster Grand was inevitable because it was never just about one man's mistreatment. It was about the toxic culture that allowed such behaviors to thrive. By standing up, Daniel shifted the narrative. He proved that dignity isn't something that can be taken away by someone with a temporary position of power. Dignity is inherent, and when defended with courage and integrity, it becomes an unstoppable force for change. The question remains for all of us. How many other systems are out there, quietly operating in the same way? And how many are just waiting for someone like Daniel, or perhaps like you, to speak out? In the face of injustice, will you stay silent, or will you rise? The choice, as Daniel Whittaker demonstrated, can change everything. The end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community, where we celebrate quiet strength, real struggles, and unexpected victories. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.